أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن الناس من يشري نفسه ابتغاء مرضات الله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here in front of you. This is going to be a bit of a challenge, but anyway. Okay, can you see the screen? Okay. I want to talk about what we call diasporic jurisprudence, and I'll explain what the term means. But basically, the application of Islamic law in the West, and how can it be applied? The term diaspora means that which is scattered, dispersed. So it assumed a community of people which has been moved or dispersed to another area. And the two terms, diasporic jurisprudence means fiqh. When you put the two together, it's a kind of contradiction, because diaspora means that which is fluid, open to change, whereas fiqh is one which is rigid and strict. But when you put the two together, it also highlights the Muslim struggle to practice their law in North America. It is a struggle because on the one hand the law was formulated in Arabia, and on the other hand we're living in 21st century America, North America I should say. It also, the two terms, diasporic jurisprudence, that is the law of Muslims, how they practice it in the West, indicates the dilemma that many North American Muslims face of being faithful to one's tradition on the one hand, and yet be able to integrate and flourish in non-Muslim countries. In other words, how do we balance the two acts of being in North America and yet not of North America? This is what has also been termed as fiqh al-aqaliyya. Fiqh al-aqaliyya literally means the fiqh, jurisprudence of minorities. In other words, we as living in North America, are we bound to follow the law of the majority of Muslims, formulated, as I said, in 7th, 8th century Arabia? Can we apply, and do we have to follow it here? Scholars now are debating the need for fiqh al-aqaliyya, this is the fiqh of minorities, simply because, as they argue, this is only a minority of scholars I should warn you, it is necessary, this fiqh of minorities, because the classical Islamic law does not address the challenges that diasporic Muslims encounter. We are diasporic Muslims. In other words, Muslims living in the diaspora. That is the fatwa, plural of fatwa, which have been formulated, created in the Muslim lands, are seen as normative, seen as binding by all Muslims. But can they bind us here? That is the question that I'm trying to address tonight. Some of you may know that there is a new genre, new type of literature which has emerged for the Shias. By the way, we Shias have yet to really discuss the whole concept of the fiqh of aqaliyya, that is fiqh of minorities. The Sunnis are talking about it. What we have done in the case of our maraji, our ulama, is produce a new kind of literature called mustahdafat. Mustahdafat literally means new circumstances or new issues from hadith, which means also new. But most of it is what it is called casuistic. Casuistic means the examination of particular cases rather than creating a new fiqh. In other words, people write to the maraji, can I shake hands with a person of the opposite gender? I don't know, can I do this, can I do that? Can I take interest from a non-Muslim? And then the response comes. Ad hoc, what we call. The response, that is, the response is ad hoc, piecemeal basis. There is no complete fiqh, if you follow what I'm trying to say, for those living in minority. These pronouncements or rulings which come from there present Islam as a legal do's and don't do's. In other words, they do not address our whole life structure in the West. They are piecemeal, telling us you can do this and you cannot do that. And a lot of this fatwa, with all due respect, ignore the particular North American context in which these laws are to be applied. Because the context here is very different. And I think we should bear this in mind. Every law is addressing a context. If you lose sight of that context, then that law will not make sense. The two are intertwined, as we say. Closely linked, the law and the context. When the context changes, the law must change accordingly. Scholars who talk of the laws to be applicable in the diaspora, in the West, they invoke certain principles that we have. One of them is maslaha, the welfare of the Muslims. That the welfare of the Muslims dictates that they do this, or your welfare dictates that you do that. Sometimes they use another principle called dharura. As we all know, dharura means zaruratche, that which is necessary. Or la haraj. La haraj means there should be no harm that is coming upon a Muslim. So they invoke what are called secondary principles. Secondary principles means that principle that you use only when you have to. To give you an example, you're not supposed to eat pork, but when you're in a situation whereby that's the only thing that you have, then you would consume it in order to survive. So what I'm saying is the laws that are applicable here, which are allowed specifically on certain circumstances, are only based on this piecemeal necessity. Well, you can do this only if you have to. You can shake hands with the opposite gender only if it's absolutely necessary. And some say you can't even do that. To give another example, Ayatollah Fadlullah says that some mourning rituals, the azadari as we call it, should be suspended if they result in the denigration of Islam. You may have seen this, and I've seen it myself in some North American cities, whereby they do the julus in the middle of downtown Chicago or New York. They take off their shirts and start beating themselves up. And can you imagine what non-Muslims think about it? Say, what, these crazies and loonies who just beating themselves up, and then they want us to become Muslims. Seriously though, because it actually denigrates the image of Islam. And anything which denigrates the image of Islam should be avoided. There is, as I see it, a contradiction between the Islamic laws and North American laws. And these contradictions have not been fully explored or resolved. For example, I'm just giving you an example, you can come up with many, many other contradictions or dilemmas of Muslims who serve in the military. And by the way, there are many, many more Muslims. A student of mine just wrote a wonderful thesis of Muslims in the Canadian Armed Forces. Or judges who are required to enforce non-Muslim laws living here in Canada. Swearing allegiance to a non-Muslim government. Political involvement that we shall hear about also. Or doctors in particular who have to perform abortion, euthanasia, female nurses who have to cater for male patients. These are just few examples of laws or issues which are not really faced by Muslims living back home, so to speak, wherever back home may be. Another issue that I feel should be mentioned is the current legal treatises. When we talk of legal treatises, we mean risala, the risala that we read. Risala Amaliya to be exact. They do not really address issues that are relevant for us today. What are the issues they do not resolve? They don't really talk of human rights. Open the Risala, with all due respect, you'll hardly see a discussion of human rights. On the contrary, you see some points of law which actually go against human rights. The ecology is not addressed. AIDS, racism, politics, economics, the socio-political challenges. These are issues which are hardly ever addressed, if ever, in the Risala. More attention is paid to topics like kur. You know what's kur? The kind of water, the amount of water by which, there is a flow so that if something najis falls in, the water does not become najis. That is the kind of issues that we often discuss. Or the distance traveled before you can offer qasr prayers. The amount of blood that invalidates your prayers. These are issues that are important. I'm not saying they're not. But I think that they are more individual-oriented than social-oriented. As I said, in the past, the laws were developed by our scholars in a particular context, stated by the imams often, and then developed by our scholars. Therefore, the law did differ on where you were and when you were. And my point is, if the law differed in the past based on the context, why can't it do so now? I can cite you literally hundreds of examples. Jurists by the way mean scholars, who have revised the law, changed the laws, depending on the novel and new circumstances. For example, one of the greatest scholars, to me the greatest scholars who ever lived, our scholar, was Sheikh Tusi, who died in 1067. He changed the ruling sometimes based on the season. So for example, it is prohibited to sell water in winter because there's water, plentiful of water. There's no value of it. You cannot sell something which has no value. Nobody wants it anyway. However, it is permitted to sell it in the summer because of the scarcity of water in that season. Go to California and you'll see what I mean in a moment. So in other words, when the demand is great, when it is in short supplies, you can sell it. Similarly, in the past, the jurists prohibited selling of blood because blood had no value in the olden days. Now it has various values, including medicine, transfusion of blood. It can be sold. Are you following? Are you able to read that? Okay, because I can't see there. Sharia, and I think that this is an important point that we have we've neglected to mention. Where does the Sharia come from? We often think that the Sharia is completely divine. And by the way, we must make a distinction between Sharia and fiqh. All Muslims share the same Sharia, but we do not share the same fiqh. The Sunnis have the same Sharia, but 4 fiqh, right? 4 fiqh schools. Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali. We have one school that is Ja'fari, but then there are differences between our scholars too. You know all about Eid and whose taqleed you are doing and so on. What I'm saying is that what we are talking of is not only Sharia, but more important is fiqh. Tabula rasa means a clean slate. When Islam came, there already were laws existing, Jahili laws. Now Islam did not say that because this is Jahili, therefore it has to go. Not every law was condemned by Islam. Only those laws which were inhumane, which were improper, Islam eradicated it. But it did not say that just because a law was established by non-Muslims, therefore we have to remove it. It's just like saying that we came to North America and therefore every North American law is haram on us. You can't do that. Only those laws which violate basic moral, ethical principles we reject, but not every law. Therefore, to think that the whole fiqh is divine is wrong. And this is, I think, a point that we must bear in mind. Custom and law are deeply connected. Any custom and any law. And therefore, Islam appropriated, borrowed, used a lot of non-Islamic customary law, as we call it. And a lot of people may be shocked to hear this, but I'll give examples. Customs are social norms before the law. So sometimes you have a custom without the law, but you cannot have a law without the custom. The law does not operate in a vacuum. If it ignores the social norms, it becomes irrelevant. In other words, you cannot have a law which is not connected to people. Because if it does not connect with the people, it becomes irrelevant in the minds and the lives of the people. And that's why, by the way, one of the qualifications of a mujtahid, of a marja, is that he, I can't say she, but in my view, even women can be marjas, but that's my view. Every mujtahid must know the local custom. Because otherwise, how is he going to connect the fatwas with the custom of the people? There were, as I said, many pre-Islamic customs approved by Islam. In fact, if you look at the Quran itself, chapter 7, verse 199, the Prophet is asked to command by the urf. By the way, custom means urf in Arabic, U-R-F. So custom means urf. So the Prophet is asked to command by the urf. And in fact, most of our rulings, which are, I should say, social rulings, not individual rulings. In other words, we have to distinguish between the laws, rulings which are connected between me and Allah, which are individual, and that which connects us with society. A lot of the rulings, which are social rulings, are what are called imza'i. Imza'i means endorsed. In other words, Islam came and endorsed those rulings. provided, of course, they did not violate basic ethical framework. There are other laws which are Islahi, reform, which Islam changed. Certain aspects Islam changed. For example, at the time of the coming of Islam, a man could marry as many wives as he wanted. Islam put a stop to it, said no, only 4, but even then put certain conditions which are almost impossible to maintain, which is to do justice to, even justice to one wife is a problem these days, let alone more than one. And you know the problems of having 2 wives, right? 2 mothers-in-law. There you go. Sorry, that's bad. Anyway, and then there is, so we're talking of endorsed rulings, Islahi reform rulings, and Ta'asisi. Ta'asisi are new rulings. So there are 3 kinds of rulings actually. One, the majority of which Islam endorsed, some which it changed, and some which established new laws. Endorsed rulings. What are the examples? And there are just a few of the many examples. The contracts of purchase and sale, discharging your debts, limited partnership, in other words, economic transactions. The issue of diya. Diya means blood money. This is also in Zahir. As you know, when a person kills another person, there is an option of accepting blood money. This was something that was pre-Islamic. Islam did not introduce it, and Islam may have changed certain aspects of it. The laws of slavery, Islam again inherited it. The laws on mahr, the guardianship of daughters, that who is the guardian of the daughter, which is called wilayatul bint. Child custody, as a lot of people have problems with child custody laws in Islam today, because as you know, for the boy at the age of 2 years, the girl of 7 years, then the custody goes to the father. A lot of people say that's unfair. But these are all borrowed laws, mut'ah, marriage, and so on. Many others, especially connecting with women, are endorsed laws. As long as it did not violate the ethical and moral vision of the Quran, the laws, local urf, as I said, local custom, was endorsed by Islam. And in the process, because Islam endorsed this urf, the urf became Islamic. Do you see the point I'm trying to make? What was Jahili actually was Islamicized. And we should not be shocked by it, not be surprised by it, because as I said, you don't remove a law simply because it's pre-Islamic. You remove a law only if it's against common moral ethical conduct. It's interesting that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he says to Malik al-Ashtar that be careful of preserving the local sunnah, the local urf, the local practice. Sunnah also means practices of a people. The Quran itself recognizes the importance of custom. Al-Ma'ruf, haven't we heard so many times, Amr bil-Ma'ruf? And you can see the word urf comes from the word Ma'ruf also. The two are related. Ma'ruf is what is commonly known, what is commonly accepted by the people of that time. No custom is infinite, by the way. There is no such thing as infinite custom. Customs change with time. And therefore the laws also will change according to those customs. The term ma'ruf occurs 38 times in the Quran. And it connotes what is commonly seen as good or an honorable. In other words, the right way of doing things. The honorable mode of behavior in contrast to what is reprehensible, munkar. As we heard so many times, amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. The concept of ma'ruf then, connected with urf, is the well-known standards of behavior. And by the way, a lot of the times of this ma'ruf appears in the Quran also regarding women. They treat them with ma'ruf. And then if you cannot live with them, then remove or basically divorce with ma'ruf also. What a lot of the men do at the moment, which is, don't want to give her talaq and prolong her agony, is against ma'ruf and against Islam, in my understanding. So ma'ruf then, the well-known standards of behavior, can change with time. And as I said, it's especially used in the Quran when addressing women. Just one example of many other examples. Importantly, as I've been trying to make it clear, that the urf includes the practices of non-Muslims too. When we are talking of customs, we're not talking of customs of Muslims only. Because every community has got customs. The more well established the custom, the more difficult it becomes to eliminate it. That's obvious. In many cases in our laws, the custom becomes an evaluative measure, how we measure certain things. So, to give you an example, in the olden days, cities would have gates, whereby you know that this is the barrier or this is the boundary of the city. So you enter by this gate or by that gate, and from that gate then you start establishing Hadd Tarakhus. Remember Hadd Tarakhus? Where you know from when you start praying Qasr namaz. Now, if you look at the fiqh books, they tell you, well, the Hadd Tarakhus, that is the boundary of the city, one of the boundaries is where you can last hear the azan. Here the azan, where do you hear the azan in Toronto? In public, apart from inside the mosque. Where are the boundaries of Toronto, for example? How do you know what the boundary of Toronto is? Brampton, Mississauga, others would say Hamilton, Oakville, or Pickering. There you go to the Orf, what the Orf says. In other words, it is the Orf that determines, tells you many aspects of the law. Another example of how Orf comes in is the principle of La Dharar wa La Dhirar. In other words, there is no harm, no injury in Islam. This is a commonly accepted law, that wherever there is harm, then you can dispense with that law, because Allah does not want difficulties for you. And therefore, for example, questions have been asked. Supposing a person is living very close to the tundra, where the day lasts for 22, 23 hours. How can you fast for 22, 23 hours? And that's where the principle of La Dharar and La Dhirar comes in. There is no harm or injury in Islam. And scholars have given us different evaluations of how to fast there. To give you another example, and there are many other examples of how Urf, custom, actually establishes the law, something that has been quite topical if you've been following about this. What's her name? Gender? The person, the man who changed his, I forget his name anyway, or her name now, who changed the gender. Anyway, if a mother changes her gender to become male, a woman who gives birth and then becomes male, is, I don't know what to call her now, he or she, now is a he. Is he then entitled to exercise guardianship over the children? Because guardianship always was on the father. Now she has become a he. The mother has become a father. Now, what do we call him? Does he or she have the guardianship, right of guardianship? The wilaya, that is guardianship, normally falls on the biological father, not on the mother who became a father. And therefore, even if she changes her gender, it is the urf, again, which determines that in this instance, the father is actually the mother. And therefore, he will not have the guardianship. To give you another example of how urf plays an important role, in our law, Ayatollah Sistani was asked, if a person who has been pronounced brain dead by the surgeons, can we consider that person dead now? Brain dead is different from actual death. And look at what he replies. He also appeals to the common understanding of death. In other words, how the Urf understand death. How the Urf call death. He states, the criteria in applying the term dead, as far as the religious laws are concerned, is the common perception of the people. Common perception of the people in the sense that the people would call him dead. And laws can also change based on custom. So laws, the custom not only shapes the law many a time, but it can actually change the law. To give you an example, during the times of the imams, the mahar, we all know about the mahar, was given to the woman before the marriage was consummated. Actually on the wedding night. And if in that case the bride claimed that she did not get the mahar, she had to produce the evidence. Because the custom was that he had to give it to her. And suddenly she says, I haven't got the mahar. Therefore she has to produce the evidence to show that she did not get the mahar. However, Shahid al-Awwal, who lived in the 14th century, during his time, the custom was that the mahar was given after the marriage. Now the custom has changed. So the custom was given after the marriage. The mahar was given after the marriage. This was the new custom. Now, if the bride claimed that she did not get the mahar, the husband had to produce the evidence that he gave it to her. Because now the custom had changed, so the law has changed also. Similarly, what is ghina? What is songs? How do you determine a song? Because in our laws, in our jurisprudence, songs is haram. Well, what do you call a song? Any kind of humming is song? Again, it is what the urf calls it a song, then you call it a song. And the law is then based on it too. What kind of music is haram or halal? As you are aware now, that music, certain types of music is allowed, certain type is not. That which is used for entertainment and amusement is not allowed, otherwise it is allowed. Well, how do you determine? It's very subjective, isn't it? And therefore, again, the urf will determine. The problem is sometimes the urf itself doesn't know. They differ amongst themselves. I think one of the points to here that we should note, that the hadith analysis, we quote this, Imam said this, which is very important. But it's also that the Imam is responding based on the local urf. And many times, our fiqh books, our hadith books do not take that into account. They don't take the context into account. I guarantee you that you go to a marja and I go to a marja, same marja asks the same question, depending on how we phrase it, the context we provide, the answer will differ. You will tell him, for example, to give you an example, can boys and girls meet each other before marriage so that they decide on the compatibility, whether they're compatible or not? Or can we arrange a mixed gathering so that boys and girls can meet with each other? Now the Ayatollah is based in Najaf or in Qom, where you don't need such a thing because the matchmaking process is perfectly okay. So based on that context, he'll say no. But then you go and tell him that no, these are the situation we face in North America, where a lot of our youth are marrying outside. We are losing our youth. Then the fatwas will change because the context has changed. And therefore, many a time when we look at the hadith, they don't tell us about the urf. And that time and context may have played a role in what the Imam had said. That the Imam said was in a particular patriarchal context. This is important, that it was a male-dominated society. And that law which is formed in a particular socio-cultural context, in a particular context, is malleable, meaning it can change. The laws are not set in stones. By the way, the laws regarding human and the divine are set in stone. So you can't say that I'll pray 2 rakat for Maghrib today, much as some of us would like to in Ramadan. Or, we cannot change those laws. Alcohol is haram. But when it comes to social contracts or social transactions, that's where the law can and must change. So the laws can and should be revised, as I said, if the context changes. Most of the questions that we have in our hadith law, a person comes to the Imam, it's an individual case. Oh, this is happening, is it okay or not? Can we do this or not? So they are case by cases, and the Imam replies accordingly. There are hardly few laws which are in a general social context. Because we get people coming from Kufa asking the Imam, coming from sometimes Central Asia asking the Imam in Medina. And also we have to bear in mind that the response that the Imam gave to one person may have been at the beginning of his Imamat, and another one at the end of his Imamat. Many a time, by the way, we do have contradictions in hadith. The Imam says one thing on one side, and the same Imam says, or the same issue, something different. But then there are questions of how to resolve this, how to harmonize traditions. It's a long process, I don't want to bore you through it, but one of the issues is that either the Imam has said out of taqiyya, or because the hadith is weak, or also because the context changed. The way that the question was framed was different. As I said, the fiqh works. Our books do not tell us the context in which a questioner posed this tradition. And that the answer of the Imam would depend on how that question was framed. To give you examples of why this is important, because urf, as I've been saying, is very important. And urf in Medina was very different from the urf in Kufa. At that time, Kufa was very important. Najaf was not. As a social community, community-wise, the majority of the followers of the Imams were living in Kufa. The Imam is in Medina. And the two urf, the two customs were very different. Why? Because Medina is very Arab in character. Medina is very Arab. Kufa is like Toronto, a hodgepodge of different people coming in to live together. And because of that, the laws were different. And to give you an example, from the Sunni case, Maliki, from the Maliki Jews, a father can marry off his virgin daughter against her wishes, even if she was 40 years old and independent completely. She doesn't depend on him at all. But because he exercises the wilayah, he exercises the guardianship. And Malik is living in Medina, by the way. And that's important to bear in mind. He's living in Medina, a very Arab, conservative, rigid community. And therefore he controls the welfare of his daughter as to who he should marry. He can even perform the marriage without even telling her of his daughter, even if she's 40 years old, as long as she's a virgin. Sorry to use the term, but this is what the fiqh works down. Now Hanafi is living, Abu Hanifa is living in Kufa. And there the law is very different. A girl there, she can marry without even asking her guardian's permission. See how completely different the two laws are. As long as she is able to manage her affairs. For Malik is living in Medina, guardianship was connected to her virginity rather than her intellectual status. Whereas for the Hanafis, it was the opposite. Guardianship was based on her intellectual status, regardless of whether she was a virgin or not. Because of this, by the way, you'll find in many of our books, when it comes to guardianship of women, it is inserted with guardianship of minors and the insane, as if the three are all together. That's the honest truth of what guardian, what wilayat means of the man. He has wilayat over the minor, of the insane, and of women. And there are differences between the mujtahid. I should tell you that also. Not all the same. Not all opine or rule the same. So this goes to show the role of the urf in shaping the law. Now I can see a few faces are a bit tired, people want to do wudu again. So let's have one loud salawat, so at least we can wake up. Sallu ala Muhammad. Now if your eyes close, that doesn't mean you need to do wudu. But if you're genuinely asleep, and the urf in North America will determine whether you're genuinely asleep or not. Actually, it's when you're no longer in your, so to say, in your senses, you've completely fallen asleep. That's when you do need to renew wudu. But if you just sleep because you find my lecture deeply meditational, that's okay. It is here that I want to introduce another concept, again, which we have paid very little attention to. It is called the concept of Sira of Uqala'iyya. Sira means the pattern of behavior. Uqala comes from the word aql, intelligent people. That is people of reason. You don't have to be a PhD, no. People who have sound mind. In other words, the custom is based on people of sound mind, not people who are Muslims. And what do you mean by that? Sira Uqala'iyya means the practice of reasonable people is sufficient to prove that the lawgiver, that is God, has allowed a particular practice. So when a jurist, when a faqih wants to make a law, if he does not find it in the Quran, he does not find it in Hadith, the fact that reasonable people, people of sound mind, practice something and Allah has not prohibited it, that in itself shows that Allah has allowed it. Are we clear about that? That any reasonable person comes to a conclusion, and that which is something which has not been prohibited by Allah, therefore Allah has allowed it. So a pattern of behavior that is accepted by rational beings has been approbated by the lawgiver, that is accepted by the lawgiver, and that there is a congruity between Surah Uqala'iyya and what Allah ordains. What I mean by this is this, that Allah has created reason within us. Allah cannot say or do something which is against what He has asked us to do by reason. Reason tells us, for example, that when you tell me something, and as I know you, you are a trustworthy person, I should accept your word. And Allah cannot tell me that because that person who was okay, was reasonable, but that you should not accept his word. Or what generally people accept the outer meaning of a particular sentence, which all people accept, Allah cannot come and say, do the opposite. In other words, Allah cannot go against reason. The Shia scholars assert that reason is in harmony with God. In other words, God created reason and therefore he cannot go against reason. Otherwise, it would mean that God created a device in us which is essentially in conflict with his purpose. It's against his own reasoning. In fact, God is the Ra'is al-Uqala, as it's called, the president of reason, if you like. He's the best form of reason. So it would be logically impossible for God to command something which is against rationality, or to demand what opposite of what the reason dictates. And therefore here we can connect custom and reason. Because the urf that we are talking about is the habit of rational people and refers to all people of reason, whether they are Muslims or not. The uqala, people of reason here, behaved according to a certain way because they are people of reason, not because they are Muslims, or not because they belong to a particular religion. So the concept of urf transcends the Islamic religion. Now what you may be wondering, why am I saying all this? Because I'm trying to connect that the urf in North America is very different from the urf in the Middle East. And therefore the urf in North America can become a source of law for Muslims in America. Am I making sense? Yeah, we'll explore this later. By the way, this is a work in progress. So if there's a fatwa against me, don't be too surprised. Because it's still evolving. What I'm saying is, in the past, local urf shaped the local law. And I'm saying local urf here can and sometimes must shape local Islamic law here, provided it does not violate the basic principles of the Quran. Provided it does not violate the basic principles of the Quran, local urf. That's why I'm trying to put all this together now. We have the urf on the one hand and uqala, that is the practice of those who are rational people. To give you an example on this, Ayatollah Sani, this is a paper I've just written recently. As you are aware, women find it very problematic to get talaq in our law. This was, as I said, a law which was imza'i, it was endorsed by Islam. Many a time the husband just leaves her, she's muttering around, has got a second wife, and she's hanging. So he's talking of the right of a woman to divorce her husband. On what basis? And here he says, he invokes the views of reasonable people and God's justice. It is against God's justice that he can divorce her at will, but she cannot do the same. It's also against the views of reasonable people, because reasonable people know that Allah is just. So therefore he argues that reasonable people would opine that since a wife cannot get a divorce, or she cannot grant a divorce, the lawgiver, that is God, has to keep a way that will compel her husband to annul the relationship, even if he does not wish to do so. So for example, a woman is living with a man, the man is very happy with her, but she is not. To give you a straight example, she's got somebody on the side. She wants to marry him. She doesn't want her husband anymore. If he can just annul the relationship at will, why can't she? And he argues, Ayatollah Sani argues, that she can, even if the reason is because she wants to marry somebody else. If he wants to marry somebody else and he can annul the relationship, this is not encouraging anybody, by the way, but I'm just telling you what he's saying. Just as he has a right to divorce her, so she should have the right to divorce him by simply returning his mahar. That you gave me this 250 shillings 20 years ago in Tanzania, take your 250 shillings back. $5,000 these days, my friends. So, and then he says, this opinion, I'm quoting Sanaina, can be established based on the views of rational people. Rational people, reasonable people, the uqala argue on this. Especially as Islam has granted the dignity and rights to all human beings, whether they're Muslims or not. I will continue with this tomorrow because the time is running short. So we will do a little bit of the Masail and then go to the question and answer period. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alihi. Today is the Shab Zarbat, as we call it, the night of Zarbat. And it's a very sad night because the Kharijis wanted to kill 3 people on the same night. They had planned it all. Muawiyah, Amr bin As, and Imam Ali were all supposed to be killed. The person who was entrusted and who agreed to kill Imam Ali was Abdurrahman al-Muljam, not Muljim, Muljam. He comes to Kufa. In fact, Ibn al-Muljam had already met Imam Ali quite a few times before. And Ibn Ali had almost predicted that this is the person who's going to kill me. Look at Sheikh Mufid Irshad, he talks about it. Ibn al-Muljam had come and given bay'ah to Imam Ali also. But now, because Imam Ali defeated the Kharijis at Nahrawan, he, that is Ibn al-Muljam, with others had decided that these 3 people are going to be killed. And he, Ibn al-Muljam, had decided he was the one who was going to kill Imam Ali. He comes to Kufa looking for people who he can trust, who can help him in this venture. He comes across a lady called Qatta'a. Apparently she was very, very beautiful. She was a Khariji too. And she harbored great animosity towards Imam Ali for the simple reason that Imam Ali had killed her father in the Battle of Nahrawan. Ibn al-Muljam proposes to her. She says, yes, I will marry you. I want 3,000 dinars. I want a slave boy. And I also want the head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ibn al-Muljam said, I came here to get you that head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I will accept your... This was her mahar. This was what she was demanding for mahar. The stage was set on the eve of the 19th of Ramadan. Imam Ali on that night, he broke his fast at Kulthum's house. For 3 days and 3 nights before that, the riwayat tells us that he one day broke his iftar at Imam Hassan's house. The next day, Imam Hussein's house. This night, it was in the house of Kulthum. He ate very little. And after breaking his iftar, he would go out again and again and look at the sky. And he would say, هذه الليلة وعدت فيها. This is the night which I have been promised. This is the night that I have been promised. He spent the night in ibadah. And early in the morning, he was about to go to the mosque of Kufa. Ibn al-Muljam was waiting. Ibn al-Muljam had actually secured help of somebody else. Shabib had agreed to help him, to kill Imam Ali. There is a riwayat that even the geese were blocking his way. And some people will say, why would animals do that? Animals get premonitions. Sometimes things that you and me cannot sense, animals can. It was as if they were telling their mawla, they do not go. Death is waiting for you. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he went to the mosque and he sees Ibn al-Muljam sleeping in an inappropriate way on his stomach. Actually, he was hiding the sword. As the adhan is given, the riwayat differ as to when exactly Imam Ali was killed. When that fatal blow was delivered. Some say as soon as he entered the mosque. Others say that he was in his salat. Whatever it may be. As soon as Imam Ali entered the mosque, others say as he was leading the prayer, Ibn Muljam stood up and he says, La hukma illa billah. There is no judgment except from Allah. How dare you give a judgment? This was at the Siffin arbitration. At that point, the blow that he delivered on the head of Imam Ali was not only a very heavy sword, but a sword which was filled with poison. It was the poison more than anything else that killed Amir al-Mu'mineen. At that point, as Ibn Muljam tries to escape the people, went after Ibn Muljam, the voices started crying, قَدْ قُتِلَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ قَدْ قُتِلَ قَدْ مَاتَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Amir al-Mu'mineen was struck now. He could not even lead the prayers. Hassan came and continued with the prayers. Hi, Imam Ali, as he was lying there, Ibn Muljam was brought in front of him. Imam Ali asked Ibn Muljam, was I such a bad ruler towards you? Did I violate God's command? Ibn Muljam says, Mawla, no, you are not. But this is what we had planned for you. Imam Ali now is led from the mosque of Kufa to his home. Some riwayat say that as the sun rose, Amir Mu'mineen says that you bear witness that whenever you rose, Ali ibn Abi Talib was already awake. He had already offered the prayers. As he was about to be led to his home, Imam Ali told those his companions of his, stop here. Don't you know that Zainab and Kulthum and the ladies are without hijab? My children will carry me into my house. We said to Amir Mu'mineen, you are worried about the hijab of Zainab, of Kulthum. Come and see the same Kufa a few years down the road, where the same Zainab and Kulthum are entering Kufa. There is no hijab on their head. Indeed, they are being made to walk under the spear which carries the head of Hussein ibn Ali. The people of Kufa are rejoicing. At that point, Zainab starts speaking. O people of Kufa, just as you laugh today, you will weep a lot. The mad folk have killed us. They have killed our men. At that point, the people of Kufa started changing their tones. When Zainab enters the darbar of Ibn Ziyad, Ibn Ziyad starts speaking to her. When Zainab starts responding, he asks, who is this? He's told, this is the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ibn Ziyad says, she speaks like her own father. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We'll have a few minutes of question and answer before the Salat time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you for a thought-provoking discussion. I was curious, you mentioned that the Risala has some places where it's against human rights. I was curious if you could remember any of how that works.
When we are saying that you can save the life of a Muslim but not of a non-Muslim, you don't have to save the life of a non-Muslim, for example. Isn't that somehow problematic for us? When it says some have even opined that you can steal from non-Muslims, isn't that problematic for us? Or, some of the laws which are discriminatory against women. There are problems within those, and I think that there is time that we need to address these issues. And we don't need to be apologetic. We have to be absolutely clear and upfront with it. Some laws which actually tells us, in the past, admittedly, that when a Christian comes to give you the jizya, you can slap him on the neck. Isn't that problematic? Isn't that somehow demeaning the rights of a fellow human being? Just because they happen to be Christians or Jews? These are the issues that I'm addressing.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Sorry.
So, you mentioned about the laws that were there before, or that were eventually became part of the Islamic laws. Now, what was the origin of those laws? Would it be from the previous messengers that were prescribed before?
Not necessarily. Every community has got customary laws. The Arabs had their own laws. It's not that the laws, they were functioning without any own customary law. After all, don't forget, there was what we call a fatra. A fatra means a gap of almost 500 odd years between our last prophet and the prophet before him. It was Isa alayhi salam. There was no recorded prophet after Nabi Isa and the time of our last prophet. It's called a period of fatra. There were people who are fathers or who are monotheists, yes. There are people who are upright, yes. But what we are talking of is customary law. The law of the customs which Islam endorsed, because it did not find them objectionable. And I don't see that as our problem. I don't know whether you guys feel that's a problem, but Dr. Mohsin.
Sorry, last question. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
You have done an amazing job to compress a lot of information, a lot of things that we need to think about in half an hour. It's amazing. But having done that, You've created a Pandora's box.
Isn't that my job?
Yes, but now we'll have to have several lectures to slowly go through them. Many observations, but one that I wanted to point out before we leave for tonight is, you see, I'm getting very confused, I would say, or just not clear. Sometimes when we talk about these, for example, the Sharia, the law, whatever, the evolution of it over time definitely is dependent on context, but I get the feeling, and if I don't know if I'm alone, is that it's somehow very reactive, almost like hair splitting, trying to be technically correct and sometimes losing sight of the context or the whole, as you quite clearly pointed out. For example, that last part of Ayatollah Sani, I guess, his extrapolation of women being allowed to do what the men was allowed to do is a continuation of, well, if men were allowed, then because of such and such, it's sort of, there's a fallacy in that logic because you're just continuing some. My question is, in the first place, can a man be allowed to divorce his wife just because he thinks it's God-given right? Our relationship with each other, parents, women, children, citizens, society, is governed by some greater laws that we may not even fully appreciate. If you can comment on that one.
I agree. I think that, as I said, this is part of the Imzai, which is endorsed laws, which is, the man almost had a unilateral rights to divorce, but a woman did not. And therefore she had it much more difficult. And I think more and more jurists are realizing that they need to be proactive rather than reactive. And therefore they are trying to, there is an intellectual revolution going on in Qom itself at the moment. Qom actually is a hotbed of intellectual activity, which is a positive thing, which people are trying to react or rethink some of these laws. We've been talking about ijtihad for a long time. I'm going beyond ijtihad in this. I haven't finished my presentation. I'll continue tomorrow. I'm going to a new fiqh for those in the diaspora. But what you say, I would agree with that, yes, because men have this right, how about women? But the issue is that a lot of women have been complaining that we don't seem to get the same right as men. Whereby, a husband can just leave me at will, but I cannot. Why not? If Islam is supposed to be fair and just for all, then why don't I have the same rights? And I think this is part of the whole idea of trying to get equal rights for all.